Hey everyone, welcome to the Human Cloud Podcast, the spot where leaders come to drive the freelance economy forward. So today we're going to do something different. We are going to do a full deep dive on the freelance economy, where we stand today. And we're also going to give you a little behind the scenes, a little brief on all the things that we're working on as well. Because the overall theme for this episode is going to be that interest has never been higher. We call it awareness if we want. But actual business performance, it's still rough. And so we're going to go over a couple things today. We're going to go over our trend tracker results from quarter one. We've now had over 250 leaders helping with the database in terms of getting the data for the database. And then we're going to tell you about some of the cool things we've done the past couple of weeks. And the reason we're going to tell you this is because in this space, once one boat wins, all boat wins, or what's that saying? What's something about the ocean and lifting all tides? So we're going to go over that, okay? And then you're going to leave this episode, hopefully, being insanely excited about what you're building, but then also having a come to Jesus moment about, hey, this is what's working, this is what's not working. And then you're going to go out and keep building. So let's kick this episode off with who this episode is brought to you by. Today's episode is brought to you by Fiverr, the global marketplace filled with skilled freelancers in hundreds of categories for immediate outsourcing. Want more? Check out Fiverr Pro, where teams can work together, you can manage multiple complex projects simultaneously, and you can gain access to the very best freelancers through Fiverr's Pro catalog of top talent. All right, welcome listeners. So listen, this is kind of weird for me, not gonna lie, being the only one to record it. Part of me wants to have like an imaginary friend next to me. Maybe I'll have Luca next to me, and if he goes, hey, Dad, that was Tom, then I'll act like I have a guest here. But listen, I am so pumped to update you on everything we've been working on at Human Cloud, and so pumped to update you on Trend Tracker. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you a little download or a little debrief on what we've done the past couple of weeks. Then we're going to get into the weeds of Trend Tracker. And we're going to get into the weeds of the exact data points of what's moving the needle for freelance leaders. When I say freelance leaders, I do mean the freelance platform leaders, the freelance solution leaders, everyone that consists in this ecosystem. If you check out our industry landscape, there's around 11 different segments that we believe are part of the freelance economy. So, you ready to get rolling? Listen, the first thing that we were part of, and this was last Friday, and this was so cool. So you all know my background was Gigster and then going to Microsoft, and I was so fortunate what we got to work on there. Specifically, the product we built was called the Toolkit, and we were enabling all Fortune 500s to be able to scale a freelance workforce using Microsoft tools. Hopefully that didn't sound too salesy. But the reality was at the time, this is back in 2018, everyone was kind of interested. The word was kind of out, but the gig economy at the time is still called that a lot. It was built for startups and SMBs. And so the reality was a company like Microsoft, to get them to say, hey, embrace a freelance workforce or go use a talent platform like an Upwork or the various was, there wasn't the privacy controls, the security controls, the compliance controls. It was really hard. So that's sort of what we cut our teeth with in the toolkit is building that. Now we got the opportunity to meet with one of the best teams in Microsoft, the leading team in terms of leveraging a freelance workforce. And I'll be honest, I had no idea what to expect. And so at first we thought, oh, okay, maybe we'll talk with the leadership team internally at Microsoft. And the reality was we actually ended up talking with over 274 freelancers who were part of their community. Now, let me just take a second to pause. That is so unique for the enterprises themselves to build their own freelance communities. Now, let me hit why, and then I'm going to hit some other ways that enterprises do this, but let me hit the why first. So the reality is there's an abundance of freelancers. There's no doubt about that. If you go to some of these big marketplaces that have 15 to 30 million freelancers, less than 1% of them are actually active. And there's typically, and right now, there's definitely more supply, meaning more freelancers than there are clients needing to hire freelancers. Now that's quickly changing. But it's also changing in terms of the best freelancers are taken. And so we had a guest named Jay, who you would meet, and he runs an e-commerce marketing platform. And one of the things he said was the best freelancers are already busy. And so if a freelancer is applying for a job, it might be too late. But so the way this connects all to the community is that when you're leveraging a freelance workforce at scale, even though legislation or compliance law makes it really hard to treat them like employees, the reality is you need to have the same loyalty, the same engagement that you get out of your freelancers that you do out of your full-time. And so in their case, in Microsoft's case, they're pushing really, really insane customer outcomes, meaning from the customer success perspective, because of freelancers. And I'm not going to get too in detail about it. So I want to make sure, large company, right? But I want to make sure we highlight there was over 274 freelancers on that call, super excited about learning how to be a better freelancer and how to be better for Microsoft. And so if you are that team at Microsoft, you have this SWAT team. You have this SWAT network, right? We're not talking about hiring one freelancer. We're talking about a bench of 200 plus freelancers that, based off the data, have better outcomes than agencies, and most times full-time employees. So that was one of the first things we did. The second thing is that last Monday we were at Georgia Tech talking to students. And what was cool about this time was that for the first 3 years, most students would say, freelance economy, I want to get a job. And this time, there's actually been 3 students that were at one of the first lectures 3+ years ago, and have come back saying, hey, I built a marketplace. I built a platform. And so the rise of, you see some data like Gen X and that kind of stuff. The reality is high performers, freelancing can make more of an impact to you and to your clients. So that's the second thing. And the third thing was, you've probably seen this on LinkedIn, but we were at South by Southwest on behalf of the DoD and the Army Innovation and a marketplace called Gig Eagle. Now, I'm going to spend the next 5 to 10 minutes talking about that. And I do have an article that maybe will go out. We'll see. It might be out after this episode. But I want to talk about why that was so impactful. If you were to tell me that 5 years ago, the U.S. government, the U.S. Army, the U.S. Innovation Unit, they care about this, I'd say that's crazy. Not a chance. And that's not the case now. I was in Saudi Arabia about a year ago, maybe at this time, maybe 10 months ago, because their government's built 2 freelance marketplaces. And there's an incredible partner named Habrati. Go reach out to them ASAP. They're the front door to the Middle East, and they're enabling companies outside of the Middle East to break in with a beachhead of the Saudi market. And so, when I first met the U.S. DoD, they asked, hey, what do you think? And I went, Saudi Arabia's already built 2. We need to hurry up. And the second thing I said was, we built the freaking internet, meaning the U.S. built the internet in DARPA. And so when you look at freelance models, it's a new internet in terms of work, right? We're creating a fundamentally new way to work, both employers hiring and whatever you want to call it, employees or workers doing the actual work. This is a brand new model. And so I'm going to give you some of the key takeaways that I had about being at South by Southwest with them. The first was just straight up, wow. So I'm going to rattle off 3 names. And our team we have a team who is Navy intelligence. So they would be better at describing the descriptions. But the first person was Brigadier General Michael McGinley. General Michael McGinley. And he's the one leading the DoD's Gig Eagle Agile Talent Ecosystem Initiative, as well as being a federal account executive at Google. That's so damn cool that a general cares about this. The second was Jay Long, founder of Parlay. He was a national security fellow at the Truman National Security Project. Damn. And the next was Chris Sailing. She's the Innovation Directorate at, and here's some acronyms, USAREC. I don't know what that means, but Innovation Director, right? So that's the first takeaway I had was, wow, that is really cool that people this senior, experienced, ambitious care about us. And, that's been one of the coolest things I'd say the past year and a half, as seeing the people come into the freelance economy, whether it's the fractional side of the house, whether it's entrepreneurs that prior to this were building venture-backed companies that were unicorns, now building stuff in the freelance space. We just, in general, there's a wow factor now of our space. The second thing, though, and I think this is also going to be one of the themes that we should all write down on a sticky note, honestly, probably for the next 3 years. And maybe we even never get over this, to be honest, as an industry. And that is, Michael McGinley had given a quote about where the freelance economy stands. And he asked me, he said, is it similar to this quote? Is it new or new to you? And that hit me. I never heard that quote before. And it really hit me because I never am not humbled in this space in terms of how much we have to simplify what we're doing. And I know, you leaders out there that are building, we look and we say, wow, this can be so cool. And then we spend years building and we get very jaded about being in the trenches. And we start to pick up terms, right? We start to say things like MSP, VMSs, all these very, very industry specific jargon. But then when you meet people who it's new to them, it can sometimes be as simple as, hey, this is software's answer to work. This is digital first work. And to me, nothing better describes this awareness problem than, is it new or is it new to you? And so my caution to all of you is, don't worry about talking about the details. Talk about the real impact that our space has. Now, delves into the next one. We can't lose the big picture. And so here, I'm going to do a little screen share and do this throughout the episode, by the way. So as you all know, this is no video. You know that my hair looks like crap as always. But so you see this chart right here, more with less. When I first got into this space, and I apologize for those that have to keep hearing this story, but I was an accounting and finance major, and I was freelancing because when I was playing college baseball, and I couldn't do a full-time internship. And so I was consulting for various clients, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But I always thought, hey, I'm going to get a real job one day. And so I did. I ended up working at the Big Four. And what struck me was how much that impact that I used to make as a freelancer, and I didn't call myself a freelancer, I was a consultant, how much that just went away. And when I dove into, okay, what can the future of the freelance economy be, and what is so important about this, it really came back to this chart, which is companies, individuals, teams, you can do more with less. And literally, you can build a 13-person company that gets acquired for $1 billion. And so there's numerous examples of this. There's Gumroad, there's Instagram. The reality is our economy today, you can do way more with way less. I'm going to stop screen sharing right now, but you're going to see it real quick. And the reality is that's the economy we live in now. And you as a business leader, whether you are hiring freelancers or you're running a freelance platform, that is the core promise of what our industry can do, is it can enable you to do so much more. And I would add, it can also enable you to be flexible. So the next point though, and this one kind of hit me as well, is I want you to sit back and I want you to think about what I'm going to say. And what I'm going to say is, what do you think about the term gig economy? What do you think about it? Does it sound, or is it distasteful to you? I know for me, I absolutely despise the word. I hate the word gig economy. That sounds gross to me. But there are many good and innovative and disruptive applications that are using the word gig, whether it be leaders, whether it be platforms, you name it. There are many good things using the word gig. And so one of the awakenings, learnings that I had from the South by Southwest is, you know what? Maybe us leaders, we need to eat some humble pie and be okay with there never being a definition or a word. And, I've heard all of them. Liquid workforce, on-demand talent. There's so many terms, and there's going to be even more. And we're so guilty of it because we use the term human cloud. But I think when we're coming back to it, always comes back is that our space enables flexible work, some call it flex work, elastic work, meaning companies can scale up and down, and work that is specialized. So you no longer have to pay for the generalist who needs 6 months to figure out what they're actually doing. You can pay for the specialist who can do what a full-time employee would do in 2 years, probably in 3 months. I'll give you a quick example of what that looks like. When I was at Microsoft, we built and shipped a product in 6 months that most likely would have taken 4 to 8 years under traditional norms. So that was one of the things I took away was, listen, the word yay might always be around, and that's okay. The fifth thing, though, is I think when thinking about these definitions and what our space is, we have to think strategically. And when sitting back and reflecting 5+ years of enterprise adoption and seeing 50+ Fortune 100s, seeing the ones that worked, the ones that didn't work, definitions meant nothing. But there was a singular force that meant that it was going to work, meaning the program, and work, meaning they're going to spend 50 to 100 million plus. And that singular force was that it was strategic, meaning there was a leader that saw it as strategic, and that leader was able to evangelize it, structure it, and scale it in a very selfish way. Not because they love freelance, but purely because they love what they're already doing and they want to succeed. And freelance is the best way to do that. And so I'm going to propose to all y'all that we use what I'm going to call a 3 horizon framework when it comes to enterprise adoption. And we're going to use this to measure where enterprises are and how to get them to where we want to be, which, if you're like me, I wake up thinking, how do I get an enterprise to spend 100 million on freelancers every single damn day when I wake up? That's what I think about. So what does that mean? Horizon 1, it's going to be simple. Is a company using a freelance platform? Are they probably using it no different than any other, right? There's no strategic process set up. There's no program. It's not scaling across the organization. It's just either a or a couple of freelance platforms that the company is using, either with their corporate cards or a blanket PO. What that can look like, and if you are working in enterprise right now, search your credit card statement. You're going to see Upwork, you're going to see Fiverr, you're going to see many others. That's the reality is that's happening is rogue spend. But that's Horizon 1, right? Horizon 2 is going to be strategic. And so Horizon 2 is there's a champion who's actually taken this and said, we need freelance. And in the example I gave in the beginning with Microsoft, we need freelance to enable a better customer support experience. That's real. We need freelance to be quicker. When we built our program at Microsoft, we needed to have quicker support.office.com results, be it articles or videos. We just needed to be quicker. And a freelance model can bring individuals in under 5 days typically. And I hate that metric because if you already have your pool built, it can be minutes. But so Horizon 2 is there someone strategic who's taking ownership of this? And there's a plan to scale it beyond that individual working team or the selfish, the exact outcomes that they're using the freelancers for. So if it's the plan is to scale, then it fits under Horizon 2. Now, this typically can look like, okay, sitting in HR, TA, not sitting in, but usually TA, procurement, you see things like VP of strategic initiatives. It's typically touching talent. But now Horizon 3 is what I'm going to argue is the sexiest, and that is full-on disruption. And so that is TurboTax Live. Now, for those of you out there, if you don't know TurboTax, you're lucky just because you probably aren't worrying about taxes, and I'm jealous of you. But the reality is taxes suck, and TurboTax is a good online software way to do your taxes. But if you all know about deductions, you all know that when you're sitting and you're putting in your deductions, you really don't know if you should deduct it or not, and you want a human to help you. That's what TurboTax Live does. It's able to put an expert, meaning a freelance tax accountant, into your TurboTax environment in under, I don't hold the exact numbers, but in my experience, it was less than 30 seconds. That is fundamental disruption. That is not just, hey, TurboTax went and hired a freelancer. That is TurboTax fundamentally just transformed their business by having a strategic freelance play. And I'm going to give a little term not to confuse y'all, but we mentioned a lot of things like direct sourcing, talent pools, freelance management, and contingent talent, all these things. I like the 3 Horizon framework because all we're really saying is what's the end business impact. That's all that really matters. So I'm done with my South by Southwest recap. Okay, you don't have to hear about that anymore. Actually, the last thing I will say is we should all pat ourselves in the back. I feel very cheesy saying that. I grew up in Boston, where you're usually not nice to people, and to say pat yourself in the back just feels weird to me. But the reality is, as an industry, I think we can do that. I actually think we can do that. So now, you guys ready to dig into Freelance Trend Tracker? So first, let me give you kind of a scope of what we're doing. So about 8 months ago, and for you all know, if you don't know John Younger, you're living under a rock. But John, I would argue, is an absolute mastermind in structuring data that gets you to be able to drive insights. And if you look at his background, you could call him Dr. John Unger if you want, but he has a PhD and he understands how to structure data sets in a way that generate insights. So what we did about, as I said, 8 months ago, is we looked and we said, hey, we've been doing some really cool reports, right? His global study on freelancing, by far the best report on how freelancers, on the actual freelancers, and what's working, what's not working, what they're good at, what they're not good at, by far the best report out there on this. We also know that we have over 100 platforms and freelance leaders in our portfolio that we have their info in our head. And so when we work with our clients, we are really fortunate to just pull the insights out of our head. But that's not structured, right? And it's not going to scale. And so Trend Tracker is, and again, also think about the podcast, we're able to bring on guests that, like I said, it quantifies the expertise that is really damn expensive if you're going through a GLG and stuff. So Trend Tracker is quantifying how's the industry doing. So benchmarking, how are you feeling? If you've had a bad quarter, well, check out Trend Tracker and you'll see if others had a bad quarter. A lot of times, at least past 6 months, you wake up and you go, God damn, this has been really hard. Well, guess what? It's been hard according to your peers. And I'll show you the data too. So that's one. Second is though, what should we be doing? Should we be investing in sales, in marketing, in our freelance community? Should we be investing in tech? Trend Tracker is damn good at figuring out what is actually moving the needle in terms of the drivers of business. And then third is it's able to predict what is going to happen. And so I'll show you some data around government support, and I'll show you why a lack of government support leads to a harder life for us because it makes freelance more expensive. I'll give you some insights there. But you all ready to get rolling Freelance Trend Track? So this is what I'm going to screen share. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to give you 3 key insights that I took away from this quarter's data. And these 3 key insights is number 1. And by the way, too, this was like a week of crunching as well. So this 3 is based off a very large data set. But the first key insight is that brand wins, meaning the freelance platforms that are top of mind are the ones that are winning. Okay, that's the first one. And we're going to get deeper into this, don't you worry. The second is that resilience is key. And what we're going to go over is that it's been a damn hard economy. And a lot of what prior had worked is no longer working. And in the future, it's going to require a lot more resiliency. So that's the second. Now the third, and I'm going to try not to get too geeky here, but bundling and consolidation seem very likely. Now, I was kind of torn about what the headline should be about this key insight, but the reality is there is an environment of consolidation. There is an environment of partnership. And I think it goes back to Andreessen's quote of all business is bundling and unbundling. And if you look at our space right now, we are insanely unbundled. And every day there is more unbundling. In our industry landscape, there's 6 new players on average a week right now. So things are moving really fast. Things are getting really wide. Unbundling. But the reality is companies just want one. This is going to be the term they use, so don't get mad at me for saying it. They want one neck to choke. Meaning they don't want 100 different freelance talent platforms. Let's just do a quick extrapolation. So some of these companies, they got 1,000 to 150,000 employees. Most companies are becoming 50% plus external. So 150K internal means 300 total and 150K external. Now, managing external is insanely hard and there's a lot of risk, as we're going to talk about. And so to say, hey, we have a couple platforms that combined have 100,000 to 15 million people. Do you want to use 10 of these? Sounds like a nightmare. And so, as I'll show you from the data, it just makes sense that our environment is looking to be opportunistic around bundling and consolidation. And then there is a fourth, and I don't want to include it in the key elements, but it is a subpart, which is that industry confidence is down. So it's down 4% from 89% of leaders being really confident down to 85. Now, I put a caveat there because if I'm being honest, It's still pretty high, right? And still a lot higher than other industries. So this is what I'm going to screen share up. And if you are watching the actual feed, you're going to see some really cool charts. Also, if you go check out humancloud.work, or you do humancloud/trend, the thing in the middle, and then tracker, you'll also be able to see all the data that I'm talking about. We're also going to do an event in 2 weeks. So if you're not a panelist, shame on you. You're not going to be invited. But if you have participated and you have purchased a subscription, then we'll see you in 2 weeks. But so, time for me to screen share. So, okay. So in terms of brand winning, here is the first chart that I'm going to show y'all. So, and I know this is pretty hacky, right? So this isn't exactly fully polished. Apologize. This is not like a nice polished Kinsey BCG thing. Yeah, all we really care about is the insights to move your business forward. So listen, if we look at the greatest driver of business impact, brand is number one, client relationships are number two, and tech is last. So I also want to show you that this did change. So if we look now at the drivers, if we look at the historical range, if we look at Q1 of this year, that's where brand is number one. If we look last year, though, it actually was client relationships that were number one, and speed was second, and talent was third. So brand has gone above. Now, there's a lot smarter digital marketing people out there, but we have heard a couple times now, whatever the hell Google did has had an impact. We also have heard that with ChatGPT and LLMs, one of the things they take away is companies' ability to have a broad search. And instead, back to the bundling, instead, there's only 1 to 2 things popping up that people care about. So this was a pretty big shift. That brand went from not being in the top 3 to being number 1. And honestly, I am fundamentally not surprised in this at all. So now let's talk about this. Let's talk about what do we mean by brand, and let's talk about how to best position you. So I have some data here in terms of quantifying the impact of brand. And let me tell you a quick story. Quick story. I apologize. Yeah. But I'm going to tell you, so when I was like my first week at Gigster, and this Boston boy that went to Silicon Valley, and I was just amazed that people didn't show up to work on time. They showed up like 3 hours later, whatever. But one of the things that I kind of got, right, I became wicked jaded about this, was I took pride in like not caring about marketing, right? It was like, we don't need marketing, right? We're tech, we're product. We just care about the customer experience and the actual tech product we're building. Marketing, we'll deal with that later. But I'm going to tell you some numbers, and it's going to show you why I was so damn wrong. And so according to the consultancy Profit, over 60% of Coca-Cola's sales are attributed to its brand. Now with Nike, Google, so tech companies, and Disney, 40 to 50% of their sales are attributed to brand. I would argue in our space, it's probably 60 to 80%. And the reason I'm going to say that is because there's a lack of awareness. So with something like Nike and Google, we all know what they do. There's no education. There's really no teaching about, hey, those are cooler sneakers. But in our space, there's significant teaching about freelance, and it's so damn manual and human driven. So that's one. The second is our space is actually pretty commoditized, meaning there's not one solution. It's not ChatGPT versus Gemini, and Gemini sucks, and everyone knows that. It is 100 plus really good talent platforms. It is 800 plus total talent platforms. And so we're dealing with an industry that's pretty commoditized, and relationships and the education are by far the most important. So I would argue around 80% of freelance companies' sales comes from their brand. So what is brand? According to Investopedia, it's a product or a business that has a distinct identity in the perception of consumers. Now, here's going to be the definition that I tell y'all, okay? I think a strong freelance brand, and this is targeted at freelance, not any other industry, but freelance. If you're building in freelance, this is for you. So first thing, I think a brand in the freelance space, it's simple to understand, meaning you don't have to spend more than one sentence and your grandma would understand it. The second is it's accessible for companies to communicate. I'm going to define accessible as someone can easily find it, copy and paste it, and justify a budget or evangelize it. So if it's accessible, you have a good website. I'm able to text. I'm able to literally copy and paste something through text and text it to my boss. Something that's really easy to find and copy and paste to use. And then third is it's effective in differentiating between the traditional industry it serves and others in the freelance space. This is probably the most important point. Some platforms have been able to get away with literally just being not differentiated at all, just purely based off the fact that there's a big wave of people freelancing and companies looking for it. But that's really quickly changed, especially if you look at our data. So when we say effective, and we're going to show you some examples here, we're really talking, and the majority of it is majority weighting, is how well can you communicate that you are better, and not just like a little better, right? Not like 5-15% better. How are you 10x better? How are you fundamentally, disruptively, transformatively? How are you fundamentally better than the traditional industry? Because that's who we're fighting against. We are not fighting against each other, meaning other freelance platforms. We're fighting against staffing. We're fighting against agencies. And sometimes we sell to the agencies, to be honest. So we're not even really fighting with the agencies, but we can. So these are my 3 things. Write it down right now. You have to be simple to understand. You have to be accessible for companies. And you have to be effective in differentiating against the traditional industry. The example I always use is, and Pat, sorry, I'm always using it as an example, but Catalan with Consulting 2.0, that's phenomenal, right? It's so simple. Consulting 2.0. It's easy to communicate. You go to their website, you search it on Google, and you'll see that what is Consulting 2.0 is one of the first thing that pops up. And then third, it obviously differentiates. And you go and you listen to the podcast episode of Pat, and you'll see real quick what he means by that and how disruptive and transformative it is. And so I'm going to tell you about another company. So I'm going to tell you about a company that used to be called NerdApp, is now called SupportWave. So NerdApp time was really cool, really good app for IT. It was an IT marketplace, but their leaders understood that they had to have a good brand and understood that they wanted to go global and go up to the large companies. Now, they didn't just say, hey, let's spend a bunch of PR and have NerdApp go global and just hope it works. They sat back and they evaluated, and they say, what is the language that the customers we want use? What are they doing already? And how are we fundamentally different? And so, it took 3 to 6 to 9 months to get the new website, get the new language, and massive kudos to their CMO, Caitlin. You can go check out their episode as well. But they're now called SupportWave, and they now have immense opportunity in front of them because they've been able to differentiate their brand. So the key for you, okay, so based off Trend Tracker, brand is by far the number 1 driver for business impact. So the key takeaway for you is, number 1, be simple to understand. If you can't reduce it to a sentence, it's too complicated. Number 2, be accessible. Have a good enough website. Doesn't need to be the best. Have a good enough website. Have a good enough website that someone can easily use their phone, copy and paste a text message to send to their boss and talk about you. And third, differentiate. One of the cool things about our space is the rise of really niche specialized platforms. There's so many. Extra Powerhouse over in Germany, Trees Engineering in Malaysia, The Starters, Ravenry. There's so many really cool specialized platforms out there. And I apologize I missed you. Go to our industry landscape and you'll see all these ones. So that's it for brand, okay? Second key insight, resiliency is key. Now, this is where I'm going to come back to sharing my screen for you. And the reason is that I'm going to show you this right here. So when we look at resiliency, there's a couple of core factors that I would argue are massive, massive headwinds, meaning the ones heading against you. Kind of reminds me like that visual you've seen where someone's peeing into the wind, right? Just smack them. So actually probably has happened, to be honest. The first thing is funding. There's no doubt it's a tough funding climate right now. 80% of talent platforms aren't prioritizing funding. Second one 56% of talent platforms haven't been successful at attracting clients. This one hurt, right? And only 8% have said that they're very successful. Third, and we're going to dig into this one, okay? 62% of leaders don't find their government supportive of the freelance economy. Now, let me dig into why this is a tailwind, right? Because the funding, that one's obvious. The lack of client acquisition, that one's obvious. But why does it matter if government's not supportive? I mean, government didn't care about Uber, right? Government said don't do it to Uber, and they did it anyways, and now look. But for our space, we're uniquely different. So there's a sad reality that we live with, that our space is insanely risky. And there's multiple factors. When it comes to privacy, security, we're really risky. But one of the most riskiest things about us, and I'm going to take off screen share so you hear exactly what I say. One of the riskiest things about us is that there's this thing called compliance and classification. And classification is literally as simple as, should this person be a freelance or 1099 independent contractor, or should they be a W-2 employee? Now, every country is different in terms of what they call this, but the reality is, should they be freelance or should they be full-time? And you kind of think to yourself, like, why does that matter, right? Like, why does it matter if someone wants to be a freelancer or full-time? And the kind of like idealistic libertarian in me is like, well, if I call myself a freelancer, why should the government tell me I'm not a freelancer? That's ridiculous. But the reality is, there's massive implications when it comes to tax, when it comes to unions, and the fact that people feel like freelancers can be exploited. And now shout out to Steve King, who, when I was this idealistic libertarian saying, hey, if people want to freelance, so be it, government shouldn't touch it. There is probably 15 to 20% of freelancers who are exploited, meaning companies just don't want to pay for their benefits and they stick them into a freelance engagement, but they treat them like full-time employees. They just don't pay them as much as full-time employees. So that is the reality. But so there's this classification thing about our industry. Why does this get really impactful? And what is the big impact? The big impact is financial risk from two angles: class action lawsuits and fines. So class action lawsuit looks like Microsoft's permatemp lawsuit for $97 million. What they said was that thousands of employees came together who were freelancers for Microsoft. They were part-time. And they came and they said, hey, Microsoft should have called us full-time employees, and look at all the money that Microsoft didn't pay us, so Microsoft should pay us now. And the reality is, there is lawyers sitting, waiting for freelancers to get mad to then be able to go sue the company hiring them. So that's class action lawsuit. Fines is that when you pay a freelancer, you're not paying their tax. And so there's between a 7 and maybe 30% tax paying on the country that is now on the individual. And let's face it, not all individuals are going to do everything to pay their tax. And so all governments are going to lose some money from tax if the world becomes 100% freelance. And so that looks like Nike, who has a $530 million misclassification exposure right now, according to The Guardian. And this is also why you're seeing companies like Deal have I think it's a 12, and make sure I get it right because I don't want to get these numbers wrong. It's a $12 billion valuation. So what's the impact of this? Because it's not as simple as, hey, there's going to be no freelance. The impact is that freelance gets more expensive. And so the reality is a marketplace or a platform is going to take 10 to 30%, and then classification is going to take more. And then if it's an EOR or some other applications, they're going to take more. And so we think it's as simple as, hey, a freelancer cheaper, right? Or cost efficient. But the reality is, if you're paying a freelancer $100 and you're a large company, you're probably actually paying $135 for the $100. No different than a full-time employee, right? We all know that full-time employees cost us double or 1.5x what their actual salary is. So the reason that this chart matters, the reason that I bring this up, and I apologize it talks so long about it, but the fact that 60% plus don't feel their government is supportive is showing the ongoing trend that governments can get in the way, and there's uncertainty. And even if they're not technically in our way, the uncertainty is in our way. And if you look at the various countries right now, the EU in February came up with their platform worker directive. The UK is kind of following with IR35. And in the US, as of I think it was March 11th, we rescinded the Department of Labor rescinded the 2021 law around how do you classify a freelancer and full-time. Now, let me say super quick what that means. The 2021 law basically said, does this individual, do they have autonomy on when and where they work? And can they prove that they have an opportunity for profit and loss? Meaning they can go invest in marketing and make more money. They can charge more based off if they learn a skill. So those are the two things. That was it. The new law has 6 different rules, of which permanence is one of those factors. So if you work for someone for more than 1 year, now you're starting to get really risky. If you're doing core work, you're starting to get really risky. And so all this to say, I don't want to turn this is not a political rant at all. This is purely the more government uncertainty and legislation uncertainty we have, the more expensive it is going to be to hire a freelancer because of the multiple layers that you're going to have to go through, meaning the compliance layers. So that's it. Now back to resiliency. All this to say, these massive tailwinds in front of us, right? Funding is tough. Client acquisition is tough. And I show you charts in the third point. But all this to say, resiliency is the number one thing in our space right now. And I'm going to call on 1 or 2 things that you need to do in order to be able to overcome this, right? And let me just call it to you, this is when good businesses are born. So this is not a bad thing. It's just really painful. Another way to put it. But the first thing you need is patience. And I say patience because I'm going to tie it back to the first point now. Brand is the number one driver of business impact. Brand is not cheap and not quick. Kind of like SEO, you have to invest in at least 6 months to see any type of results. Brand is similar, if not more, and brand is more, you have to be consistent. And so brand was number 1, client relationships was number 2, and speed, which is operational excellence, was number 3. So what this is really saying is that your brand is number 1, your client relationships are number 2, operational efficiency is number 3. This is really saying this is going to take a long time to build a good business. Okay, this is not going to be like I created a JPEG and sold my company in a weekend, or I went to a hackathon, built this thing, and we sold our company. This is not our space at all. This is a 12+ month investment. And so I say patience because whether it's brand, client acquisition, or operational excellency in terms of what's really moving the needle for business impact in the freelance space, patience is the prerequisite to be able to do those 3 things. And the next thing, and the second thing, which is going to be how you can be patient. And I know this is not going to be like revolutionary at all. You got to be profitable. There's no other way to put it. I've raised capital. I started in Silicon Valley, so I understand the pain that the venture loop can go through. And I want to make sure that I'm not saying that you shouldn't raise money. I just want to make sure I'm calling that out there. What I'm saying is that raising money is secondary and subsequent, and depending on your context. So if you are able to, if you've had an exit prior, if you have close proximity to a venture round, and the venture round's not going to tell you what to do, if you're able to have your own terms, listen, that might be the best move for you. But you do have to be profitable default, and you have to be able to be patient, because even if you do go raise a round at 10 million, you're still, in order to win in this space, you're going to have a good brand, good client relationships, and operational efficiency or excellence. So, third point, bundling and consolidation seem likely. I know it sounds easy to sit here and say, hey, it's going to be a time of consolidation. And it kind of already has, right? There's been a couple platforms that have had, whether they called it a private equity strategic partnership or what, it's basically an acquisition, right? It's basically M&A. And this doesn't look like it's going to go away. And so I'm going to pull up charts again, but I want to make sure we call out that in 2018, Upwork IPO'd. In 2019, Fiverr IPO'd. I think, right? And I'm purely saying, I think that there was probably less than 100 platforms globally, maybe even less than 50 out there. Now there's over 800. And like I mentioned, there's 6 new ones a week. So all that to say, bundling has gone crazy in our space. Now I'm going to show you some data points that are going to that are signaling towards we're looking at consolidation and bundling. The first one is going to be subjective. It's going to be a quote from Mina, the VP over at Airbus, who, let me read out his quote for you. I would say there are way too many platforms out there. Ideally, for a corporation like ours, we want an Amazon model where I just simply, whether I buy toilet paper, a toothbrush, whatever, it's on the same place, same payment methods, same types of conditions, same ways of getting things to my front door. That is a message consistently across every single enterprise, whether you're talking about procurement, HR, legal, you name it. They need, not want, they need one neck to choke. And we just spent so much time going over the classification aspect of this. This is why they need one neck to choke. They don't want to work with 10 different marketplaces. They want to have one MSA. They want to have one massive thing of terms that their procurement team gets blessing on. So that's the first thing. Now, I'm going to go back to showing you some charts. And if you are at the gym working out, this is your excuse. This is your absolute excuse. So I am going to show you this one. Okay. So the first factor, and I was torn between whether I should show you this at first, but that would bring down the mood too much, to be honest. So out of the business performance in Q1, 62% of leaders are okay or neutral. Oh, wow, that actually doesn't make sense. They're okay or bad. 29% are frustrated, and only 8% are very satisfied. Now, I'm going to show you compared to last quarter. So last quarter, 48% were neutral or unsatisfied. So there's been a 14%? There's been a 14% increase in people not being too happy about their business performance. So that's the first thing. Second thing, even though performance isn't too good, 57% of the leaders are confident about their internal team. Now, third one, and this one kind of hurts. 62% of talent platforms are neutral or not prepared for the event of a recession. Okay, not third or fourth one, to be honest. Yes, that's going to be the secret. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And like I said, if you're part of Trend Tracker, you have access to all this. So when looking at those four factors, I need one neck to choke. Business performance is plateaued. Yet, I'm really confident about my team, but I don't feel good about a recession coming up. I don't know what we're going to do. I'm neutral about it. To me, those four factors scream, well, this is a good time to buy. If we use a housing analogy, there's over inventory. This is finally a good time to buy. The valuations, probably a good time for valuations, because if you like the team you got and you're confident that the team you got can perform, yet the business performance is not lining up to it. And if something bad happens, you're not going to be well suited. And we all know what's going to happen in the next 6 to 12 months. But based off of that, I can't tell you that it's not a time of consolidation. Now, here's the reason that I use the word bundling and not just consolidation. The reason is that you as the platform leader, so now let's get into what you as the platform leader. You as the platform leader, you got to be looking at partnerships. You've got to be looking to go together with similar marketplaces, similar type partners. I'll give you an example of a meeting we had yesterday. There's a kick-ass payment solution. I can't wait to tell you all the name. There's a kick-ass payment solution that is able to bring the world to Africa, meaning able to bring the world to be able to compliantly pay African freelancers. And they embed within a freelance marketplace. Those two can combine because when one wins, the other wins. Our space has that same property. Now, the data I'll give you is 54% of platforms find partnership with other similar platforms important. That's not including the example that I just mentioned. So I'd argue it's even higher. But what does this really look like? So you guys probably hear sick of me saying these stories because there's our very similar people in the blah, 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 as founders. But there was a three-way partnership that really kicked ass in creating a scalable global presentation deck. And that might sound simple, right? But these large companies, they spend 200 million plus on their presentations. So they were able to come together as three: Uncompany, IndieList, and Olo. Uncompany here in the US, IndieList over in Ireland, Olo in Brazil. And they were able to have three different price ranges, a diverse range of the services they could perform under one umbrella. And the second company that really took this and ran with it is Habrati, being the front door to the Middle East. And you'll see the big announcement they had on Business Wire with Telmix. So companies that are really able to navigate this type of environment, it might be an acquisition, it might be a strategic partnership. I don't know, but either way, tying it all together, large companies need one neck to choke. There's way too many solutions out there. You need to separate your brand, meaning you need to be simple, accessible, and you need to differentiate. You need to have, meaning creating and nurturing strong client relationships, and you need operational efficiency. We, meaning as an industry, we simply can't do it alone. And I will call out every single leader that uses the word competitive. Our space is not competitive in any way, shape, or form. Even if you do lose a deal against each other, there's 10x more deals that you can do together. So let me tie it all together. Brand absolutely wins. Resiliency is key, and you got to look to bundle. And let me repeat that again. Brand wins. Simple, accessible, differentiated solutions win in our space. We are not a tech space. Can't say that enough. Resiliency is key, meaning you need to be patient, you need to be profitable. A good brand, good client relationships, and operational excellence takes 12 plus months to show. And third, you got to start bundling. You might get acquired this year. You might do the acquiring this year. And then last, kind of had brought up, but I want to put a big caveat, is industry confidence did go down 4%. But let's just shelf that. I want to quickly say what's next, okay? It's next for Trend Tracker, and I've seen the demo, I'm pumped about this, is that right now we can give you the data of all, and we can give you the data of historical. Last quarter was this quarter is this. Come next quarter, we're going to have 3 quarters. But, and kudos to our tech team, you can now compare. That's what's going to be next on the horizon. And we already have a little bit of, we're doing this with our partners, but a little bit of this. You're able to say, hey, the number one driver has been brand, but what about for tech marketplaces? What about for marketing marketplaces? What about consulting marketplaces? And I'll be honest, when our tech team showed us this, my face, I popped. I'm like, oh my effing God. Because we're not a tech industry, right? So like, we're not a tech industry, but the level of insights that we're going to be able to generate for y'all in the next 6+ months are going to be incredible. And so if you are a big consulting marketplace thinking about, should we add a new skill layer or a new vertical, or should we go acquire? Or if you're a PE firm, figuring out, what company should we add to our portfolio? If you're a staffing company, if you are the marketplace thinking about where you want to go next, we're going to have that for you. So listen, I hope you guys liked this episode. I feel weird as hell just doing all the talking, and usually my keynotes are like 15 to 30 minutes, and this has gone on for 50 minutes now. So I apologize for those that, we do average I think it's like 2,000 to 10,000 listens per episode. So for those that had to listen, I apologize. Hopefully you made it all the way to the end. And listen, I just want to give a big shout out to our team. Most important, for all y'all, go check out humancloud.work. Go check out John Younger's Forbes column, literally weekly, sometimes daily, he puts stuff out. And then most importantly, get out there, go drive some change. If one of us wins, we all win. And thanks y'all for moving the freelance economy forward.